Polemics is what gets Sauls to become Pauls. Saul knew his material. He could go to every Pharisee and he knew the scripture better than they did. Well, Adam Seeker is a Saul who's become Paul. He is now bringing hundreds to the Lord Jesus Christ. He is one of the makers and shakers of Islam. He has now come on board, and that's why you need your Sauls to become Paul. Look at Hatun Tash. She is a Saul who's become a Paul. You do not shut her up. And in 3 years, she brought 1,000 Muslims to Jesus Christ, and all she did was look at these 2 books. And we need our Sauls who become Pauls. And the best way to do that is to shut down the Quran, shut down Muhammad, and shut down Mecca.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Inspired, if you're new to us, is all about meeting different contacts, different friends of mine from across the globe who are doing beautiful works of God. And, we're bombarded by a relentlessly negative narrative in the media of pessimism and depression and anxiety and fear-inducing stuff. And the whole point of this is to come against that. And I think that's why Inspired is being so enjoyed across the world right now, is because we need good news and we need stir in our faith. And I've got no doubt this week you will be stirred and challenged in your faith because we got with us Jay Smith. Welcome, Jay.
Well, it's good to be with you, Simon.
Fantastic. So Jay, you can tell already from his accent, he's American. He was based a lot of his life in London, where he did a lot of work at Speaker's Corner. He is apologetics and polemics, isn't it? That's what. Do you want to describe what you do, Jay, at the start?
Yeah, that's probably good, since most people have no idea what you just said. These are the 2 words that we use. I'm both an apologist and a polemicist. In some ways, they go hand in hand. Now, it's much like your football team. You have your offense and you have your defense. And the defense, you need to have that defense, because if you don't have a good defense, the others score against you and they win the game. And that's called apologetics when we're using it in a theological term. And there's lots of need for defense. I did my first master's degree on apologetics, but not Islamic apologetics, just regular apologetics, how to defend against the atheists and how to defend against the humanists and the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and any of these other isms. But the great thing about football is you don't just go there to watch defense. You want to go and watch offense, because the offense are the more exciting players, and they're the ones that win the games, and they're the better known of the athletes on the team. And that's what we call polemics. So polemics is going the other direction. And to be fair, if you look at the American football, you have 2 complete teams. One is defense, one is offense. They're never on the field at the same time, and they have completely different skills. And that would be the same way when you're talking about offense and defense, with Islam especially. Because Islam is very much a polemical religion. It attacks us on every scale. I mean, almost any chance you have, if you do have a chance, I really hope you do, when you engage with a Muslim and you tell them, and I always tell my students, always go up to them and say, listen, I believe that Jesus is God, and I believe that the Bible is the Word of God. Do you have an opinion? And they will have 6 hours of opinion on just those 2 subjects. God bless them, because they're so passionate to really confront the person of Jesus and the Bible. And that's where our apologetics has to come in. We need to be able to know exactly how to defend both Jesus, the Trinity, the divinity, his divinity, and his existence, things like that. And then we also have to be able to defend the Bible, its authority, the whole textual criticism that's thrown at us. So these are something that we are taught well to do. We can defend Jesus. We can defend the Bible. We should, at least, because that's what our seminaries and our Bible schools really center on. The problem is the other direction. When you go the other direction, you don't really have to know much about the Bible and Jesus. You need to have to know about the other, which means for Islam, you're going to have to know this book here, the Quran. And how many of you have studied this book? Very few. We don't teach it in our Bible schools. We don't teach it in our seminaries. Goodness sakes. I mean, how many of you have even read this book? And certainly how many of you have really read it to really confront it? That you don't do. In some countries, it's a capital offense if you were to do that. And so as Christians, we're told never to confront this book, never to confront the man behind the book. See, they start with the book of a man like we start with the book of a man. Our book is the Bible, our man is Jesus. Their book is this one right here, and the man behind this book is Muhammad himself. And so how many of you would even to be willing to attack the Quran or Muhammad? How many have ever heard that ever taught? There's no place in the world that teaches that except our school. MAPI, Master of Art in Apologetics and Polemics. The word polemics is built into the title of our course, and we're the only ones in the world to do that. You're looking at the only man in the world that has a doctorate in polemics. I'm it. There is no other anybody else that has a PhD in polemics of Islam. Now that should tell you right there what the problem. The fact that most of you probably didn't even know what this word meant, the fact that probably none of you have ever taken a course on polemics, and the fact that I know that none of you are a polemicist and certainly have a degree in it, proves that we're way behind the ball on this when it comes to Islam, because Islam is a religion of polemics. Just open this book and read it, and just look at the polemic, and polemic after polemic after polemic. Attack against our Lord Jesus Christ, against his divinity, against the Trinity, against us as Christians, against Jews, against pagans, against idolaters. The entire book is polemic after polemic. And because the book is so polemical, then look and see what Muhammad did. Look at his life. Look and see what he did against the Jews there in Medina in 624, 625, and 626. He confronted the Banu Qaynuqa family, threw them out of Medina. He was from Mecca. He was even from Medina. He confronted the Banu Nadir family in 625, threw them up to Khaybar in the north. And then in 627, Muhammad confronted the Banu Qurayza family, the third remaining Jewish tribe, took all 800 men in one afternoon and slit their throats, took the women as concubines for his men and the children as slaves. Now, that's called polemics on a large scale. I call that genocide. It's so polemical because there were no Jews left after he did that in 627. So you can see Islam, if that is their model and if that is their book, well, folks, you can see then why they attack us as soon as we open our mouths. And that's why so many people are fearful of Muslims.
Yeah.
Because they don't just attack us with their mouths. They attack us physically, and you in Britain know that, because you saw what happened on July the 7th, 2005, where 52 people were killed. But that's not just been the only attack you've had. You've had attack after attack, physical attack, bombs. You've had people, now look at the Westminster Bridge, 5 people were killed on the bridge, and another man was killed there just on his way to get into the parliament. Your parliament, you're the head of your government. And had not been for that policeman that gave his life to save you, that would have caused all kind of carnage. So you've had more attacks in Europe than any other European country, and yet you, as British, have been the least polemical. You have no restriction against Islam in Britain. Listen, I lived there for 25 years. You had no restriction. Every other European country has restriction after restriction. You have nothing. You allow Muslims to do what they want, go where they want, build what they want. Even you allow them to have Islamic law built into your British law, Sharia law. And yet look how they respond. And how they respond is because of what this book tells them to do. It's this book that says that they are to slay the unbeliever wherever they find them, besiege them, lay in wait for them with every kind of ambush. That's chapter 9, verse 5. It's this book that says to slay the unbeliever until there was no more fitna. That means there is no more unbelief in the land and all believe in Allah. That's chapter 8, verse 39. It is this book that says to cut off the heads of the unbeliever. That's chapter 47, verse 4. Have you heard these verses before? Have anybody opened the Quran to read these verses? It's this book that says nothing about peace with us. There's not one verse in this book that says they're to have peace with us. Yet you hear Muslims all the time say they are a religion of peace. Not this book. This book doesn't allow them to say that. So that's why there is a need now to go on the offense. There is a need for us to now start saying we've been sitting back trying to love Muslims into the kingdom. We've been sitting back trying to find commonality with Islam. And the only thing you're taught there in Britain is what we call the grace method. Mm-hmm. Just say yes. You know what I'm talking about, Simon, because you know that this is the only method that is taught in Britain. It's the only method that's taught here in the United States. It's the only method that's taught anywhere in any of our Bible schools, in any of our seminaries. And the grace method starts from the premise that you don't confront the Quran and you don't confront Muhammad. Well, who do you think whose agenda that is? That's the agenda of Islam. We have taken on their agenda. We're teaching it in our Bible schools. We're teaching it in our seminaries. We're teaching them how best not to take on Islam. And what have you been told? Everywhere you go, you have been told to love the Muslim. Just say yes. You know I'm right, mm-hmm. Simon. You've been told to come alongside them, to find commonality with them, not to confront them, never to raise your voice, to be Christ-like, just like Jesus. And you forget to read the Bible. You forget to read what Jesus did with the money changers in the temple. You forget to see what he did with the Pharisees in Matthew 23. You forget that Jesus was also polemical. But if you want to find polemics, goodness sakes, Brian, why don't you start with Paul? Why don't you start with Paul? Everywhere he went. I mean, I tell my students all the time, go and read Acts chapter 17 and 19 and look and see what he did in Laodicea and Cappadocia and Berea and especially in Ephesus. Everywhere he went right into the synagogues, never invited. He didn't get to know anybody. He didn't even know their names. He just walked right in, uninvited, went to the Pharisee, and he confronted the Pharisee with what they had done to the Messiah. That's polemics. That's polemics. There's no friendship evangelism in that. There's no coming alongside and finding commonality in that. And look how they responded. They beat him up. They put him into prison. Twice they tried to stone him to death. He caused a riot in Ephesus, and they finally got him killed in Rome. Now, folks, that's what's going to happen when you use polemics. And that's why no one wants to use polemics in Britain. And I'm one of the only few, and I'm the oldest one around anymore. We just had our first conference of polemics worldwide. The first conference of polemics anywhere in the world just last week in your country, in your city of London. And 170 people showed up. And I had 15 of the best polemicists anywhere in the world. I brought them in. I had them all come in. I had David Wood there. I had Anthony Rogers there. I had myself. I had Bob the Builder. I had Chris from Speaker's Corner. I had Dr. Robert Kerr there. I had Dr. Paul Blackham there. I mean, I had all of your best polemicists, all the best ones in America and United Kingdom. And we got Auden LaFontaine that came in from France. We had Francesco Maggio that came in from Italy. We had Mel Cormican that came in from Ireland. We brought them all to one building. I'm not going to tell you where that building is, because this is going to go up on the airs, and I want Muslims to find out. And for 3 days, from 9 in the morning to 9 in the evenings, we taught polemics. The first time this has ever been done. We opened it up for people to come in here because we recorded everything, but 230 people signed up. Folks, show me any, this is something that's fascinating. Show me any conference in Britain on Islam that has that many people show up. Do you see what's happening? You in Britain, I finally realized you need help. You need help. And so we did that just last week. And then we all descended on Speaker's Corner on Sunday, June the 9th. It was, I've been at Speaker's Corner for 25 years, and I've never, ever in 25 years saw what I saw last Sunday. The Muslims were scared. They would not engage with us. In fact, Mansour Ahmad, who's been there for 30 years, he refused to take on. He saw Anthony Rogers. Anthony Rogers is one of the leading, in fact, I would say he's the leading authority in Islam on the Trinity. He can shut down every Muslim on the Trinity. I see your hand up, so you want to get a word in edgewise. You got to stop me, otherwise, Simon, I'll just keep going.
You're already in fifth gear. I wanted to find out about your childhood and stuff like that. But what I was going to say is that, as we're there, explain to people what Speaker's Corner is, because most people won't know what it is.
Oh, wait, this is your institution, Simon. I'm shamed on you if you don't know what Speaker...
Well, I do,
you
but many
guys
don't.
gave us Speaker's Corner. It only exists in Britain. This is unique to Britain. It's the bastion of freedom of speech. I remember growing up in India, and I used to hear about Speaker's Corner, and I always wanted to get there, because it's the one place where you can say anything you want. It's right there, smack dab in the middle of London at Hyde Park on the northeast corner, where Marble Arches, but just across the street, because that's where they had the executions. Every Sunday, they would execute the prisoners, and they would give them their last defense. And they'd get up on one of these soapboxes and give their defense. It never worked. They still got executed, but the soapboxes were there, and the crowds were there, because that was the only entertainment they had in the week. They didn't have television, radio, and this kind of television that we have today. They had speakers, it was called Speaker's Corner. It was called Execution Corner. And so once they executed the prisoners, the soapboxes were still there. The crowds were still there. So people would get up on the soapbox and preach and teach and do their social platform or the political platform. And as a result, that then started the tradition of what is now today called Speaker's Corner. And it's been around for 200 years. Now, what you do, Simon, we don't get up on soapboxes anymore. That's where that term "get off your soapbox" comes from. It comes from Speaker's Corner. What we do now is you bring these little kitchen ladders, A-frame, that only have 2 steps. So you can just get your head above the crowd. That's all you need. And you have to be able to do 2 things. To get people's attention, you either have to be controversial or funny or erudite. One of those three things. And if you aren't any of those three things, you're not going to get a crowd. And that's how you measure how well you are, by how big a crowd you have. And then you've got to hold them there for at least 30 to 45 minutes, because you've got to be able to take them. But the major thing is you're going to have to take on the hecklers. Because the hecklers, the codgers, they call them old codgers. That's where the term codgers come from, Speaker's Corner. The codgers are there, and they try to shut you down with these one-liners, and they're brilliant. And the better you are, the longer you last, the more you can take on the codgers, the bigger the crowd is, the more popular you are. And so I had to learn that craft. It's a craft that is not taught anywhere. We don't teach this in homiletics. We teach how to do a sermon from 20 minutes and do 3 points and bore your subjects to death. And then, of course, when you're walking out, they shake your hand and tell you how great you are, because they can go home and have their dinner. But it's Speaker's Corner. You're not taught how to engage a hostile crowd. And that's why, in some ways, Speaker's Corner is the best. You guys have it right there in your town. It's the best workshop in the world to learn how to deal with Muslims. For a number of reasons why. It teaches you how to memorize everything in your head, because you have no computers in front of you. Mm-hmm. You may have your iPhone or your smartphone, but the sun's on it. You can't read it anyways. So you've got to be quick on your feet. You've got to be able to engage. You've got to be able to shut down the opponent. That's why you're not able to get a word in edgewise, because I just shut you right down. I just talk right over top of you. And that's where Speaker's Corner teaches you to do that, because the Muslims are amazing at that, and we're not. We just don't know how to do that. So Speaker's Corner has an awful lot of advantages. It's there only on Sundays, and the problem is Christians don't go to it. The Muslims dominate the corner. And the reason they dominate the corner, Simon, is because they're an oral culture. And they see that as a huge asset. We don't. We don't like argumentation. We don't like to dispute. And we have this idea in Britain, and same here in the United States, that if you argue, then you've lost the plot. Islam sees it just the opposite. Yeah. If you don't argue, you've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. If you're not passionate for what you believe, you're deceitful. And if we come across as timid and shy, which all you British do, you're all told to do that. Yeah. I've never seen a group of people that are more timid and shy than the British Christian. Mm-hmm. You are all timid, because that's what you're taught to be. Without thinking, the Muslim in front of you looks at you and they say, well, this guy's not worth listening to. He doesn't. And I ask Muslims all the time, how do we come across as Christians? They say, you're timid, you're shy, you don't know what you believe, and you don't know how to defend it. Because you're so scared you're going to hurt the sensibilities of the Muslims if you say what do you believe. You're so scared that they're going to attack you. And you're so scared that something may happen to you. That needs to stop. Yeah. And that's why there was over 200 people at Speaker's Corner last Sunday.
Wonderful.
Isn't that great? So we need to start learning how to do apologetics. So that's my story, and that's the definition of polemics.
Great. We had Hatun Tash on the show a couple of years back, and I saw you with her at Speaker's Corner, weren't you? She's a great lady. She's a brave lady. She's been stabbed there. Did you often feel in genuine danger there? I think it was more in the early days, wasn't it?
No, none of it. Listen. None of us are in danger anymore. Islam has now become the religion of peace. Since 9/11, they changed their narrative. And since 9/11, they've had to prove that they're a religion of peace. Speaker's Corner is now the most benign. There's a lot of yelling still, and there's a shoving. There'll be shoving, but nothing more than that. And the only reason that Hatun is unique because she's an apostate. You and I are not.
All right. Explain that again. Apostate.
She's an apostate. She's left Islam. Yeah. And that's why she has to be killed. But more than that, she's also a provoker. She provokes them by wearing those T-shirts. She goes way beyond. And number two, the number reason why she will be killed is because she is the one that found the kira'ats and the ahrufs. And those kira'ats and ahruf just demolish the preservation of the Quran.
Can you explain what that means?
One woman, 5'2". Yeah, let me explain. Hatun and I go back many years. In fact, she was my student way back in around 2012 at Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. And she was in my class. I won't tell you her whole story because I'm not permitted to do that, but she is from Turkey. Her father is a very famous imam. And she had to leave Turkey very suddenly because she became not a Christian. She just said that she loved the Lord because of what she read in the Bible. She hadn't become a Christian at that time, but she had to flee Turkey, and she came to London. She came to Oxford, and she then met the Lord there, and she gave her life to Jesus Christ while in Oxford. It was after that that I met her, and she was my teacher. I'm sorry, I was her teacher, and she thought that I was arrogant. I come across as arrogant because I'm so confident. And she said, you were just arrogant. You thought you knew more about Islam than I did. And it turned out I did know a lot more about Islam than she did. And because I've been working at it with over 40 years, longer than she was living at that time. And so I did, at the end of the class, I did say, listen, if any of you are free, Speaker's Corner is only about an hour you can come by train. And we'd love to have some of you there. And I'm going to get up on a ladder. And if you want to come down, come and join us. So she came down that next Sunday just to out of curiosity and never stopped coming. I mean, she just came one time and was hooked. It was a perfect environment for her. She loved the cut and carry. She loved the engagement. She loved the publicity, the publicness about it. And she loved the fact that you could go and shut down Islam there, unlike anywhere else in Britain. You can do it there because it's the bastion of freedom of speech. So it was not long after that she joined my team. And I saw in this woman an amazing mind. She had an amazing capacity, but she also has an audacity that I've never seen in anybody else. And she only sleeps 3 to 4 nights a week. The rest of the time she's up all night just studying. She doesn't need sleep like you and I. And so I started getting her up on the ladder and trained her how to do the ladder work, because you do have to learn how to do ladder work. After being there for 25 years, it took me a long time to learn how to use the ladder and the ladder is amazing, because if you've looked at any of her YouTubes on the ground, she gets drowned out all the time. And a lot of times you can't tell what people are saying because there's so much yelling going on. There's such a cacophony of noises. Whereas when you're on the ladder, you control everything. You control the crowd. You can shut down the people who are yelling at you. You can decide what you want to talk about, and you can decide who's going to respond to you, and you can play with them. And the crowd becomes useful idiots. But you can only do that from the ladder because you have so much control, not on the ground. And so I was training her up how to do that. And she was one. I think it was in 2013. She took off and went to North Africa. And while she was down there to train up some missionaries down there. And she just asked these missionaries, some of who had been there for 20 years, how many Muslims they'd won to Christ. And they said, well, none. She says, what do you mean none? She says, well, we haven't really got to that yet. She says, what do you mean you haven't got to the gospel yet in 20 years? And she got angered at them. And she said, well, what are you using? And they said, well, we're just using this methodology and that methodology. It was all friendship. They had lots of friendships with Muslims, but never had really gone beyond that because they were so fearful they would lose that friendship. So she said, well, do you have first of all, how many of you have Qurans? Not one of them had a Quran. She says, well, you need to just start using the Quran and start unpacking it. So she went down to a bookstore there in the city she was at, and she went to the guy behind the counter and says, could you please give me a Quran in Arabic? She not knowing Arabic herself because she's Turkey. And the guy said, well, which one do you want? We have over here, we have Hafs, we have Warsh, we have Qalun, we have Kisai, we have Ibn Kathir. She said, what are you talking about? She says, well, these are all different Qurans to memorize. Each one you memorize, depending on which one you want to memorize, you buy that one because your family will memorize it this way, another will memorize it this way. She says, are you serious? So she said, well, give me them all. They only cost a few dollars, so she brought them back to London and showed them to me. And I just started laughing. I said, these are the qira'ats. These are the readings. These are the different Qurans, each of which is different, that you read and memorize. But if you are in North Africa, you memorize the what? Here, I'll just show you. Let me just show you. See back up there? I've got 9 of them. Do you see those 9 up there?
Yeah.
Those are 9 Qurans. Everyone's different. No 2 are alike. And they're all Arabic. And they're all over 1,000 years. All of them are over 1,000. Let me just show you the 2 most popular. I'll take my earphones off and I'll be right back. So these are what we call Qira'at Qurans. That means they're all complete Qurans. This one here is the Hafs. This is the one that you read there in Britain. This is the one that they now read in Britain. This was compiled by a man named Hafs in the city of Kufa, which is just south of Baghdad. And he died in 796. Now, do you think he knew Muhammad, who died in 632? No. Of course not. He died 144 years after Muhammad. Do you think he ever went to Mecca and Medina and heard Muhammad receive the 7 different ahruf, or the 7 different readings, the different standards? No, because he's not even on that list. The first 7, he's not there. Yet this is now memorized by 93% of the world's Muslim population. 93. And that's because of one man in 1924, 100 years ago, who chose it as the standard Quran. Chose it from what? You say. Well, let me just show you this one here. This one is Warsh. Two different Qurans. This is Warsh. This is memorized by all the Muslims in North Africa. And in North Africa, they memorize this version. They better memorize this version because between these two books are 5,000 different words, which means 5,000 different sentences, which means 5,000 different meanings, which means 5,000 different doctrines, different theologies, and different practices. Now you can see that's a problem, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about, these are not translations. These are Arabic Qurans. They are standard Quranic Arabic. Mm-hmm. Okay? But they are completely, they're in where they differ, they're completely different. And that's a dilemma. Because if you live in North Africa and you memorize Warsh, you don't want to have to then start reciting the Hafs because there's been so many different, you're going to have to rememorize the entire Quran again. And can you see why that causes a dilemma? That's why they have to keep printing them. Well, I'll tell you what happened. We decided, and she said, well, how many are there of these? And I said, well, listen, there should be about 30 of them. According to Wikipedia, just go up on Wikipedia, there are 30 of them. The initial 7 that were chosen by a man named Ibn Mujahid in 936. 936. Muhammad died in 632. So this is 300 years later, he chose the first 7. Why did he have to choose the first 7? Because there was no dots and vowels in Arabic in the 7th century. But you see, there are dots and vowels in here. If you look here, it's full of dots and vowels. You see that? Can you see all the lines? Mm-hmm. You need to have dots and vowels to be able to read what words you're looking at. If you have just a smiley face like here, that could be 5 different letters. If you put a dot above it, it's a ba. A na. 2 dots is a ta. 3 dots is a tha. 1 dot below is a ba. 2 dots is a ya. Na, ta, tha, ba, ya. But that didn't exist in the 7th century. There were no dots and vowels. There were only 16 consonantal letters. So no one could read what was being written. If you look at all the earliest manuscripts here. So here's the problem. So when they started inventing the dots and vowels in the 8th and 9th century, 8th and 9th century, not 7th century, you decide to put your dots and vowels where you want to. Well, I decided to put my dots and vowels where I want to, and my name is Hafs, and I live in Kufa. Your name is Warsh, and you live in Cairo. And then Ibn Kathir, he lives down in Medina. He puts his dots and vowels where he wants to. And then you have Qusay, who lives in Mecca. He puts his dots and vowels where he wants to. And suddenly people start proliferating all over the Muslim world at that time in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. And so by the 10th century, there are 700 different Qurans. 700 different Qurans. All being memorized by different families, by different groups, even by different cities. Yep. Now you got a dilemma. That's why they had to choose the 7. But hold on, these 2 are not in that 7. And these are the 2 most popular ones. So then they had to choose 2 students from those 7, and that's another 14. That was done by Al-Shatibi in the 12th century. And then in the 15th century, in 1429, another man named Al-Jazari chose another 10 on top of that. So 7 plus 14 plus 10, you have 30 different Qurans. Now, here's the dilemma. 30 different Qurans, how do you have standardized tests on these Qurans? You can't. And that's why in Cairo, in 1924, the students were coming to class, and they were writing 30 different answers for every question. And so they had to go to a man named Muhammad ibn al-Zani al-Wadad, who was the senior lecturer at Al-Azhar University in 1924, and he chose this one here, the Hafs.
All right.
That was just for Cairo, though. Now you can see the problem. So we went down to Speaker's Corner, Hatun and I, and we held up 26 of them for the whole world to see
I saw that.
In 2016. That was the first time the world had seen it. Nobody knew that these existed. Including a good man named Muhammad Hijab, who is all over the internet. He lives in London. He's probably the biggest star on the internet right now, and he has millions that watch him. He was there in the crowd. He was there at the foot of my ladder, and he was filming me. And he saw what was going on, and he quickly went outside the crowd, and he said to everybody, come to me, come to me. You can see him. It's all on film. We've got it right there on Fander Films. To come to me, I'll explain what they're doing. Don't look at them. Don't listen to them. That was in 2016. He had no idea what to do with this. So in 2020, he had an interview with Dr. Yasser Qadi, the world's leading authority on the Quran. And he did this in the middle of the interview, and we recorded it. I was there watching it live. He put his hand out and he says, okay, Dr. Qadi, which Quran is the eternal Quran? Which is the one that's in heaven? Which is the one that was revealed to Muhammad? Which is the one that Uthman canonized in 652? Before he could finish his sentence, Yasser Qadi said, stop this. Don't ask me this question. We don't talk about this in public. Turn off the camera. Turn off the camera.
Wow.
Oh, I loved it. And then he went on and says, this is the most difficult question for Muslim scholars for the last 1,000 years. And Al-Jazari, who wrote 80 books on this in the 15th century, couldn't even come to any conclusion on this. And and so Muhammad said, well, was this the crisis of faith you had when you were doing your doctorate at Yale University in 1995? He says, no, not crisis of faith, crisis of knowledge. He says, but I've never lectured on this in the last 25. You'll never see me a video on this. We don't talk about this. And he said, and Muhammad Hijab, well, so this must be easy. Just tell me which one. He says, don't ask me this question. He said, the Western scholars have come leaps and bounds in the last 100 years, and they're looking at us like the emperor with no clothes, because we can't answer this question. He said, we have a respect for the Quran, and we put a red line right here, and we don't ask certain questions of the Quran because of the respect we have. So we stop right there. We don't ask this question. But at Yale, there are no red lines. You can ask any question you want to. And he says, you, pointing to Muhammad Hijab, you in the East, Muhammad's living in London, right? You in the East, your standard narrative has holes in it. Ooh, I love that. And that coined the phrase, and that's why we use it now. The standard Islamic narrative, S-I-N, has holes in it. Of course, we know sin has holes in it. And so he was the one that coined the phrase. We've been using it ever since. So the standard Islamic has holes in it, and this is just one of those holes. We're finding huge holes from here on out. A lot to go through.
Brilliant. So your ministry has just exploded in terms of, you can film something at Speaker's Corner or wherever, and it gets seen by 500,000 or 1 million people. And I know you're getting just endless conversations and emails coming in about people coming to faith, people leaving Islam. Can you tell us some of those stories?
Yeah, I mean, let me just say this. It's exploded all because of one thing.
Right.
It's exploded. When I started on YouTube back in 2006. Now, take a look at the date. YouTube did not exist prior to 2005. So a year into YouTube's existence, I started doing these videos. So I've been doing these videos, we're talking about 17, 18 years. Yeah. So I'm one of the old guys. I'm one of the old guys on YouTube. That's why I have gray hair. And I was not having huge hits. We were not getting a lot of leeway because most people didn't like polemics. And my material is all polemics. Until I started confronting the historical critique. The historical critique, which means the book, the man, and the place. Those three things. The book, the Quran, the man, Muhammad, and the place, Mecca. And it was really when COVID hit in about 2020 that everybody was home and they started, because they were home, they started getting onto their YouTubes, that they came across this new material. And that's where I came across the coins. And then I came across the rock inscriptions. And then I came across the manuscripts. And then I came across the Qibla. And then I came across these material, which are every one of them is a standalone study. Suddenly, everything just exponentially exploded on the internet and on YouTube for me. So that where back 4 years ago I had maybe 10,000 subscribers, I'm now over 100,000 subscribers because of this new historical material. And it's this material that's bringing Muslims to Jesus Christ and they're living Islam. And the reason why, it's very simple. It's very visual to begin with. It's very easy to explain, and it is not Islamophobic whatsoever. I don't ever say one thing against Muhammad or against the Quran or against Muslims. I don't need to, because I'm asking a much deeper question and a historical question. And that's basically I'm saying, did Muhammad exist? Show me, prove me that this guy, Muhammad, existed in the 7th century. Did the Quran exist in the 7th century? Prove it to me. Show me a Quran from the 7th century. Did Mecca exist? And that's the biggie. Show me that this city exists. We can now shut down Mecca very quickly. I can do it in 5 minutes. I'm not going to do it right here. But because of that, once you shut down Mecca, then you shut down Muhammad in the Quran. Because whatever Quran you come up with and whatever Muhammad you come up from, he's not from Mecca. And if he's not from Mecca, then it's the wrong Muhammad. It's the wrong Quran. So that's why Mecca is so effective. Now, I did a debate back in 2014 on the 6 major manuscripts with Dr. Shabir Ali, probably the world's leading authority, a debater. That debate only took about 2 hours long. Only about 700 people watched that debate, but over 1 million have watched it subsequently. And there was a guy in Pakistan who was one of the real up-and-coming stars in Islam there. And he was already on the internet. He had a huge following there in Pakistan. He speaks fluent Urdu and Punjabi and Hindi and English and Arabic, all 5 languages. And so he was given the responsibility to look at that debate. He wanted to look at, they said, could you look at this debate? Shabbat Ali, when he 2 months after that debate, he wrote a 9-page rebuttal to try to help him because he was so hugely criticized around the Muslim world for having lost that debate. And spectacularly, because the material in that debate is a cut and dried case of that the Quran has been changed. And he then looked at that debate. And maybe about a year ago, I was on a live stream, and he was on the live stream, and he says, "Are you Jay Smith?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you the Jay Smith?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." "Why?" He says, "It is because of you that I'm a Christian. Wow. It is because of you." And he said, it all happened in one debate. He says, "I was given this responsibility in 2018 to watch this debate that you did in 2014 to come up with a rebuttal to it." And he says, I watched that debate, and in 2 hours, I'd left Islam.
Wow.
In 2 hours, I left Islam. I didn't become a Christian, but I no longer believed that Islam could be true, and I no longer believed and trusted the Quran because of that debate. That's how quick and easy this is. Now, I said, well, let's get together. I said, I see that you're now moved to America. And I said, just email me. And here I find out that he's only about an hour and a half from me. So we went to a Cracker Barrel. This is a very popular restaurant here. So we met at the Cracker Barrel, and he gave me a big bear hug. And, of course, you don't see his face. So it's the first time I saw him. Mm-hmm. And we were getting down, we were eating, and he told me his story. And then he says, I have baptized 100 Muslims in just the last year. Wow. And the first thing I do is have them watch that debate. That's all they need. I said, just watch this debate, and then let's talk. And he says, that you don't realize how effective that one debate was, just that one debate. Yeah. Now, I said, well, you mean the one on the manuscripts, the 6 manuscripts? We have much better material than that. He says, yes, but you don't know how devastating what Dan Brubaker found and what he did with those manuscript variants. Shut down any notion that there could be a Quran that goes all the way back to Muhammad, or that it was one Quran. I said, well, listen, I've got 3 of them in my car right here. You want to go look at them? He said, you've got them here? I said, yeah, they're right over there. I can show it to you. They're right sitting over here. They're huge. They're big, tall facsimiles. So we opened up the back of my car, and we took out the Petropolitanus. And he started going like this with his finger, and he started reading it, the Arabic. I said, hold a minute, you can't read it. There's no dots and vowels. None of these manuscripts have dots and vowels. He says, yeah, I have it in my head. He says, wait a minute, here's a word missing. And he goes down, next line, here's a whole phrase that shouldn't be there. I said, this is Adam Seeker. If you don't want his name is Adam Seeker. Go up online and just put it. He has an English channel that has about 36,000 subscribers. He has a Hindi channel that has about 100,000 subscribers. He has an Urdu channel that has over 200,000 subscribers. He does debates every Saturday, and he brings not just 1, 2, he's brought over 100 Muslims. Almost every week he's bringing Muslims to Christ. And all he does is confront the Quran. And he confronts these manuscripts. And he can read them. See, you and I can't do that. Not even Dan Brubaker can do that, because we don't have the Quran in our head. And I said, this is amazing. So now that I'm back in the United States, I'm now taking a picture of every page, sending it to him, and we're going to shut down the Quran, he and I. So he only lives an hour and a half from me. So that's one example right there. Now, stop and think. Why is that important that we get these kind of men and women to the Lord? Because if you use love and friendship, which we talked about at the very beginning of this talk, when you use love and friendship, the kind of people that you bring to the Lord are people that want to be loved. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. People that are striving to be, have no love in their own community are usually social misfits. The social misfits are the ones that are craving for love. And we come along and we give them all the love they want, because that's all we're taught to do. And listen, we need to continue doing that, because they do need to hear, they do need to know about Jesus Christ. The problem is this: if you bring people that are loved into the kingdom, they're the least capable of going back into their own community, because they're social misfits. And so what we tend to do is we extract them out of their community, because they immediately get persecuted for that. And then they become parasites on us. And then we send them from church to church to church to church to talk about the persecution. And that's why all the stories from every MBB is about persecution. Have you noticed that? But where are we getting our Sauls who become Pauls? You remember Saul?
Yeah.
See, Jesus had 12 disciples, did he not? But who was the most effective disciple? Not those 12. We forget the 13th, Paul. Paul was by far the most effective, but he was chosen later. Why? Because none of the 12 could do what he could do. None of the 12 were really opinion leaders. They were not makers and shakers of Judaism or of anything else. They were not misfits in any way, but they were not the ones who could really engage at the highest level like Saul could. Saul was a Jew, but he was a Pharisee, but not just any Pharisee. He came from the Shammah school, which is the school that wanted to shut down any opposition from outside. And that's why he was standing there holding the clothes of those who were stoning Stephen. He was on his way to Damascus to bring the Christians in chains and kill them if they refused. That was Saul. Saul knew his material. That's why God met him in the road to Damascus and made him from Saul into Paul. Now, look what happened when he became Paul. Not much difference. Paul was just like Saul in that Paul knew his scriptures. He knew exactly how to run with the best. He was able to, there in the Areopagus, to confront the Stoics and the Epicureans on their level. He knew the philosophies of his day. But most importantly, he could go to every Pharisee and he knew the scripture better than they did. And that's why he confronted them with what they had done to the Messiah. See, where are our Sauls who become Pauls? Where are we getting those kind of people, that kind of caliber? Because everywhere he went, he started a church. And that's why we have the book of Ephesus and the book of Corinth, and the Corinthians, and the book of Philippians, because he wrote back letters to each of the churches he started. And look at the book of Romans, impregnated with theology. Nobody was of the stature of Paul. And we need our Sauls who become Pauls. Well, Adam Seeker is a Saul who's become Paul. He's now bringing hundreds to the Lord Jesus Christ. He is one of the makers and shakers of Islam. He has now come on board, and that's why you need your Sauls to become Paul. Look at Hatun Tash. There's another Sauline who's become a Pauline, if there's such a word, I don't know. Yeah. But she is a Saul who's become a Paul. You do not shut her up. And in 3 years, she brought 1,000 Muslims to Jesus Christ, and all she did was do this. Look at these two books. Yeah. She went into mosques, 400 mosques. And she just shut down the Quran. One 5'2" lady, look at the damage she has done. So that's why we're using polemics. Polemics is what gets Sauls to become Pauls. We can't wait for God to meet them on the road to Damascus. We've got to do it ourselves. And the best way to do that is to shut down the Quran, shut down Muhammad, and shut down Mecca.
Amen. I mean, it's very challenging because I've been to missions college and I've got loads of friends who are out there using the other methodology of saying friendship, evangelism, grace. They're sowing seeds. You don't want to sit and validate their approach, but what you're sharing is extremely challenging. Now, we've talked about Hatun, and Hatun, she talked about leading 1,000 people to the Lord in the last stretch.
17 imams have become Christians because of her. Those are the Sauls who become Pauls in her own ministry. 17, all from around London. Yeah, now, she's not even from England. She desecrates our language.
And she. So she was stabbed. She nearly paid the ultimate price, and looks like she might in due course. I know you were. Our mutual friend Alex Bunn was with you when. You were bleeding from your neck after one attack, and you said, please don't tell my wife. Tell us that story and how in danger, you're saying you don't feel in danger now?
I don't like telling that story. I said it to you before the recording just because you asked, but I don't like that to go out on the internet just for a number of reasons, because those are the stories that we all love, and that just makes more fear on Christians. It is so rare that you ever get in England. How many people do you know have been killed in England because of sharing their faith with the Muslims?
Yeah, not many. No.
And Hatun Tash is unique. Hatun Tash but they are trying to kill Hatun Tash. You didn't even hear about the gun that they brought to the corner just last year. The guy that was brought the gun, he got stopped by the police on the train on the way there, and he had in his backpack 500 pounds to buy the gun. He had a picture of Hatun, a picture of Speaker's Corner, so that he could shoot her. That just happened a year ago. So not only was she stabbed, they're now trying to kill her with a gun. But she's out of commission right now. I can't tell you why or what's going on, but she's out of commission. She's no longer down at Speaker's Corner.
So your message to Christians would be, do not be afraid. Get into the book.
Absolutely not.
Go on.
For heaven's sakes, listen, I don't want to say no one's going to be killed. But so what if we are killed? Look at the commissioning of the 12 in Matthew 10. What does Jesus say to the 12 disciples? You're going to be hated if you speak in my name. You're going to be persecuted if you speak in my name. You're going to be jailed if you speak in my name. You're going to be flogged. And number 5, you're going to be killed. That's the commissioning of the 12 disciples. He said, listen, I have not come to bring peace. I've come to bring the sword, to set father against mother and daughter against mother and father against son. And then in verse 38, he says, he who is not willing to bear my cross is not worthy to be my disciple. So why are we even having this discussion? Why should this be a problem for us? Of course we're going to be beat up. Of course. And if we're not getting beat up, then we're probably not preaching the gospel. And if we're just looking for peace and reconciliation, that is not the gospel, folks.
Yeah.
The gospel is absolutely confrontational. The gospel will absolutely get you killed. And if it doesn't cause you people anger and get you persecuted, then you're not preaching the gospel and we're not receiving our commission. So I don't even know why we speak about all this persecution all the time. The people who tend to get persecuted are the ones who are the weakest. People like me, I get beat up here and there, yes, but who cares? I could use that as a badge. I use that as an honor. And if I'm not getting beaten, if I'm not getting oppressed, if I'm not being confronted by Muslims right, left, and center, if I'm not getting death threats, then I'm not preaching the gospel. I assume that what I'm going to say is going to shut them down, and because of that, they will want to shut me down. But they're not going to kill me. Usually, I have to be careful because now, tomorrow, maybe someone gets killed and say, Jay, you got it wrong. Well, it's so rare that we get killed. What we tend to do and what they tend to do is they tend to give you death threats. And I laugh at death threats. So what? Kill me. I'm just going to be with my Lord that much quicker. But that's the attitude we should take. Yeah. Not this fear, fear, fear. I don't want to say anything. I mean, look at all the people around the world that don't even use their names anymore because they're so fearful that someone might find out who they are. Yeah. To me, that's that. And when the Muslims hear that's not your real name, what do you think the message comes across to them? Wow, you're not even willing. How many Christians you know who don't even use the word Christian anymore? Or missionary. We don't use the word missionary anymore because we're so fearful that we're going to get killed or hated. Now, there's sometimes you can't get into the country if you do, so that's why it makes sense in that case. But this idea of running away from being persecuted and hated is exactly against the gospel. And every one of the disciples was hated. They were all persecuted. Every disciple was thrown into prison. They were all flogged in prison, and every disciple was killed except for John. Paul was killed. Why in the world should it be any different for us? That's what I say. So when people say, tell me your story about persecution, I say, why don't you look at, I'm not going to say about persecution, I wear it as a badge, and I don't want to cause this fear that always comes out whenever you bring up these stories. Because then people say, that's why we can't get people to work in the Muslim world, because they're so fearful because they've heard so many of these stories, mainly from MBBs who have been persecuted.
Muslim background believers.
Because of the fact they are usually the social misfits. And notice how many of them go back into the Muslim community. No, they spend all their time going from church to church to church to church. They don't go back to the Muslims again because they're hated to begin with. They're the wrong kind. They're not the Hatuns or the Adam Seekers or Al-Fadi. Look who I work with. The guy that I'm on all the time, he is another Muslim. He is a Salafi Muslim from Saudi Arabia. He puts his face out in public. He's had all kinds of death threats. And that's why I say those are the kind of people I want to work with. I want the Sauls to become Pauls because they are bringing thousands to the Lord. And we need to start getting on board to start doing that because we're losing this battle, Simon.
Yeah, no, You're
losing it in Britain.
I totally agree. I think of our gang in Burundi. I mean, I just think that what you're saying is so unbelievably challenging. It's normal for my Burundian brothers, I've been in Burundi 20 years, they expect to suffer their faith. I think a lot of the world, Christians living in Muslim majority countries, they expect to suffer their faith. For the Western ear to hear this is so challenging because we have settled for such a domesticated Jesus and a diluted gospel which promises all blessings at no cost. I mean, I think of I was talking to our guys in Burundi. We got a team that reached out to Muslims and two of our guys have been killed. But they said, Simon, when we're packing things away after reaching out to the Muslims and they're stoning us, it would be really nice to have a car to make a faster getaway. That's a legitimate request, isn't it? When I'm training people up in the UK to share on the streets or to go out, they're like, I remember one lady saying, have you got provisions in place in case we get beaten up? And I said, well, do you know what? In a way, I hope we do get beaten up because then as you talk, it's about the badge of honor. But the word I said to them more seriously, the most likely thing that's going to happen to you, the worst reaction you're going to get in Bath where I am now, or in London, or in the West in general, the worst reaction you're going to get is no. I'm not interested. And so it's crazy. So I suppose as we slowly draw to an end now, Jay, is that what you're saying is so challenging to the listener. How can they start with baby steps in terms of engagements and not leave this podcast feeling completely inadequate and a bunch of losers?
And that's why I want to make sure also that we don't talk about. I know that you were going to get into the persecution part, and I want to say stop that, because that is what causes fear, and that's what says I'm not going to work with Muslims. And whenever I hear these stories. So I tell people just don't waste your time with those kind of stories. You're not going to be killed, and even if you are, so what? God, welcome it with open arms, because that's a life worth giving. Now, I would say this: probably the easiest thing for people to do when engaging with Muslims is just to take down the Quran, take down Muhammad, and take down Mecca. It is so easy. Let me tell you how. Go up online and go up on YouTube and go up on my Fander Films and go back to a talk I did 8 months ago at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. It's just a 1-hour talk.
Yeah, I saw that.
That talk is 1 hour long. 3 million people now have watched it since September when I gave it. I was not planning to do an hour. I was planning to do 4 hours, but Jack Hibbs, the pastor there, says, no, Jay, we're only going to give you 1 hour. That's all you're going to get. And usually it takes me 16 hours to teach this, so I had to scrunch it into 1 hour. But that talk has gone all over the world, so much so that it's even down at ELF, where I was just 2 weeks ago, at the European Leadership Forum. They wanted that. They said that talk that you did was similar to that, has gone to 1.8 million just on our YouTube site. Mm-hmm. It is smashed all the records. Everything has been smashed because it is so easy to use. It is easy to use. This is something you don't have to know you don't have to know one word of Arabic to use this material. That's the beauty of it. And what's most important, because you're asking historical questions. See, let me just say this, Simon. There are 3 forms of polemics. There are 3 categories of polemics. One is what we call internal polemics. That's what you do. That's what everybody does. That's what David Wood does. That's what Hatun Tash does. Internal polemics starts from the premise of opening the Quran, reading its pages, and confronting what you read on the pages. I don't like this. That's misogynistic. That's violence. That's called internal. You're looking at the book internally. And then you're looking at Muhammad in the book internally. You look at Muhammad. Look what he did to women. Look what he did here. Look what he did. He married this 6-year-old girl named Aisha, and then he consummated when she was 9 and he was 53. That's called internal. You're looking at Muhammad and saying what a terrible man he is. That is that close to hate speech. And that's why people call us Islamophobic. Because for them, it's attacking Muhammad, it's attacking the Quran, it's attacking Muslims, and I did that for 30 years, and I hardly got any converts to Jesus Christ, just hardly any, because they walk away from that. And most of the attacks they give, they said these are not real. So what? Muhammad, oh my goodness, of course he took on 6-year-old girls, hoorah. And of course he had 12 wives, hoorah, I wish I was like that. So they don't even see it as a polemic. They almost see it as you're aggrandizing our prophet. Thank you. What did Jesus do? He didn't even have a wife. He never had any women. I'd rather go to Muhammad because he's more like me. So you can see why that kind of polemics, it's great. We still need to do it, but it really causes more anger than it does really bring people to the Lord. Then there's the second part in what we call cultural polemics. Now, cultural polemics is looking at Islam here in the world today, looking at it culturally, politically, financially, looking at it hygienically, looking at it socially and morally, looking at what Islam is doing in the world today and just showing how irrelevant it is. And there's enormous amount of need for that. But again, it's that close to hate speak, because you're attacking Muslims. You're attacking their testimony. You're attacking their witness. And Muslims are going to listen to that? They're just going to walk away from you. The third form is what we call external polemics. So you have internal, cultural, and then external. External polemics is what I do. External says, who cares about the Quran? Who cares about Muhammad? We're going to ask a much deeper question. Did he even exist? Was there even a place called Mecca? And was there a book called the Quran? Now, what you're doing then is you're just saying, let's just look at the 7th century. Stop wasting time with the 9th, 10th, 11th century. Let's just look at the 7th century and see what we find there. And guess what? Muhammad is not there. There's no reference to Muhammad anywhere. But who is there? Well, take out the vowels. Remember, there are no vowels in the 7th century. There was no oo, ah, ah. That didn't exist in Arabic. So when you take the oo, ah, and ah out, what do you have? Muhammad. Well, of course, Muhammad's everywhere. He's on the coins. He's on the inscriptions. He's in the Bible. He's in Hebrew. He's in Aramaic. He's in Arabic. Every one of these 3 languages that have the same consonantal roots has Muhammad. or Mimcha Mimdal. That's Jesus, the Messiah. He's all over the coins. But he's not Muhammad. He is the Messiah that the Jews are waiting for to come the first time in Hebrew. And he's there in Song of Solomon 5:16, 11 times in the Old Testament. He's been there since 1400 BC. That Muhammad is what we need to be looking at. And that Muhammad is Jesus. And that's why we need to bring him back to the original Muhammad, the original Jesus, because the Quran is full of it. If you take the dots and vowels out of the Quran and take it out of Arabic and put the Syriac dots and vowels from where it is borrowed from and the Hebrew dots and vowels from what it is borrowed from, take it back to its original text, it's all about Jesus. Let's bring him home to Jesus Christ.
Amen. Oh, Jay, this is so challenging to my thinking, I know to everyone who's listening, and very, very helpful. If people wanted to follow you and be in touch with you, and what's the best material you'd push them towards?
Fander Films. Fander Films is where this is all going up. And this is the Pfanderfilms. It's the German spelling because it's named after Dr. Karl Fander, who's my hero from the 1800s. He was the one, I'm doing exactly what he's doing. I'm just following in his footsteps. He was a German scholar, got his doctorate at Cambridge University, and then went all over the Muslim world and translated all the earliest traditions into German and then into English so that we can have them today. And he asked the very same questions. Why is it your Quran is so full of errors? Why is it your Quran is so full of contradictions? Why are there scientific errors in it? Why is that historical anachronisms? Well, that's what I've been using for 30 years. And then he got into the historical critique, and he was the first to really introduce the historical critique way back in the 1800s. So that's why we call it Pfander is his name, and then films after that.
Okay.
And then we also have a website. You can go up on our website, which just been inaugurated 1 week ago. And it's called fandercenter.org. So fandercenter.org, Pfandercenter. It's the American spelling. My apologies. .org.
Great. I'll definitely put that in the blurb. So listen, what I suggest we do is that we wind it up here, and then I'll put a link, and those that want to listen to more, and you're willing to do more, aren't you? So we'll go on for another hour or so. So, all right, everybody, if you've enjoyed this, please pass it on to people, gossip the podcast, give us a great review on Spotify and iTunes. I want to thank Adam Thomas-Steer for the editing, Mike Sandeman for the mixing. Next week, we've got another fantastic guest with a very different story. In the meantime, you guys have a great week. God bless you, and toodaloo.